So, first question for tonight goes, how is it possible that the Buddha didn't make further karma when he was still living in this world?
Because his mind was purified from ignorance, avijja, which conditions craving, and attachment, which is the source of karma. There's no more attachment to self. There's nothing to be, nothing to get, nothing to have or want anymore from in his mind. So there's no need to make any more karma. But while he was still alive, he still had a body and 5 khandhas. So these 5 khandhas are the product of past karma. So even the Buddha accepted that, he was born as a result of past karma, living in the world. He's got a body and his faculties that are the result of past karma. But he had purified his mind from all delusions, so there's nothing left in the mind to make fresh karma. No sense of self or attachment to self. So everything becomes just ordinary behavior, what we call giriya, which means just behavior. So, whatever he's doing is just the ordinary behavior of the khandhas. So he still eats food and he still goes to bed at night and he goes around and he teaches people. But everything he does, if he's teaching people, it's through pure compassion and wisdom. It's because he can teach, and maybe there's somebody who needs to be taught and they come forward and request teaching, and he can see what they need, so he gives them advice. And all the suttas are kind of different occasions when he was teaching different people or groups of people out of compassion and using his wisdom to do that. But there's no sense of self, any need to make karma, to do anything, to be anybody, to have anything. Even the attachment to life was no longer there. It's not like he was clinging to life, because there's no more fear. That's all being seen through. It's when you have breakthrough and you see impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and not self of your 5 khandhas, then there's nothing more to make karma. So when the Buddha dies, we say enters parinibbana, that's it. There's nothing left to be born. There's no more karma, no more craving and attachment to bring him back to be born again in the world. That's the same for any arahant. They no longer are making karma. They have mastery of their mind. So the Buddha can think or not think as he wishes. So if he needs to think, how to teach someone, what needs to be said, understand the details of a situation, well, he can. Or he can choose just to dwell in samadhi, in jhana, and not think anything at all. He can choose that. He has complete mastery of his mind. Every arahant has mastery of their mind. So they don't need to make any karma anymore. There's nothing they want, nothing they need to get from the world, and they have the mastery of the mind. So they're not kind of like normal people, just kind of plagued by endless desires, wanting things and not wanting things, attraction and aversion, liking and disliking. They're no longer plagued like that. They have complete mastery of the mind. So no more karma is made.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. I am new to meditation. I was doing as per the instructions today, counting breath meditation 1 to 10, but during the pause, in breath in or out, still the mind goes to other things. Is there any way to overcome this?
Practice. Everyone's the same. I used to have big problems with the pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. I think most people do. It's often, the movement of the in-breath is enough to keep you interested, because it's a very subtle thing, isn't it? And then the pause, it's just, there's a stop, there's a gap. And your mind it's just like this wild animal just waiting to burst out and get away, because of the power of craving and the karma the mind wants to do things and think things and remember things. So that pause is like the sort of the break where you just off it goes. So I think everyone has this problem, and you just have to become mindful and aware and learn what you need to do. So you know the problem now. You know, in between the breath, you breathe in, there's a pause, and your mind wanders away. You breathe out, there's a pause, and your mind wanders away. So you know the problem. Now you have to be alert, pay attention, and be ready for it. So as you breathe in, and there's going to be a pause, you know that's the moment your mind is going to want to escape and start thinking about all this other stuff. Be ready for that. Catch it. Mindfulness allows you to catch your mind, pull it back to the breath, bring it back to the breath. And sure, you'll lose it many, many times. So you have to be very patient and don't get disappointed, but just practice, but also anticipate the very moment when your mind wanders away and cut it off just before it wanders away. You're there to say, no, stay with the breath. And you keep doing that until you can. It's just practice.
Sadhu. Another question. What does it mean to wear out the old karma?
Well, one way you wear out old karma is you die, because this body is a product of old karma, and it only lives for a certain number of years, and then you die. So that old karma that produced this body, this set of khandhas, wears out. But you can also, just talking about mental activity, say you have a negative habit of mind. When you're angry, you tend to be rude or insult other people. You express your anger with insulting other people, say, and you've noticed that. You have this tendency to insult others, for example. It's just an example. But then you see the suffering of that. You see the regret in your mind after you've done it. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. You see the pain or the hurt in other people who you've insulted. So you develop an awareness, this is bad karma, this is a cause of suffering, this is something I want to change. So it's like the sun arising in the morning. It's like the right view arising in your mind where you say, this is a problem, this is a cause of suffering, I want to abandon this. And you keep watching and you keep learning from that, and maybe focusing, homing in on this one particular weakness of yours that you insult or say negative things to others. But now you're on the case, you keep working on it. And you say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to change this habit. If nothing else in this life, I'm going to change this. I'm going to give up this habit. So you start, being more mindful of your speech when you're getting angry. When you want to say something very insulting to someone else, you try your best to stop yourself until you can do it. And then you keep working on the inside. Once you've learned on the outside to not say those words in those situations, next you work on the inside, the very verbal karma or the thought patterns that would lead you to say those things. You start letting them go, changing them for patience, tolerance, kindness, compassion, mindfulness, bringing up all the more positive, useful qualities, and also seeing the suffering of following negative trains of thought and speaking them out till your mind just doesn't want to do it anymore. It's tired of the suffering and causing the suffering. So that karma wears out, and you may just give up that habit. Eventually, you keep practicing, you'll eventually give up that habit, you'll change that habit. You could say that karma is worn out. It could be a specific karma with another person, but it's also just a certain habit in yourself that you've noticed. Gradually wear it out until it doesn't come up anymore.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. When one experiences suffering, what does this mean to understand suffering?
Well, that's the first noble truth, isn't it? To know dukkha or suffering as suffering. Because when we're not mindful and we're not reflective on the Four Noble Truths, we tend to attach at that moment. Suffering arises, some physical or mental painful, unpleasant thing, some form of suffering arises. We take it as self immediately, automatically, because of the lack of awareness, lack of understanding and mindfulness and insight. So you're not seeing suffering as suffering. It becomes you, who you are, and so it'll tend to produce more suffering. You experience something unpleasant. It gives rise to an unpleasant feeling, some attachment, and then you start thinking and acting accordingly. So the suffering prompts you to make karma and make the causes for more suffering. Could be greed as well. You see something you like, I want that, and you're caught into the suffering of wanting, desiring, and you don't see it. You're not mindful at that moment. But if you establish mindfulness, you see, oh, this is the suffering of craving, desire. I want something, I'm not satisfied, I'm not content, I'm not peaceful. When you see the suffering as suffering, then your mind starts to let go, doesn't it? Oh, I don't want any more of this. So you start letting go of the craving at that point. So this is the practice of the path, the fourth of the Noble Truths. That allows you to see suffering for what it is. Why do we keep suffering and experiencing suffering in life? Is because we don't yet recognize it for what it is. And you can even do something that's, we do it all the time, don't we? We enjoy certain things, but we don't realize we're also stimulating further craving and attachment in that situation. So there's the immediate suffering, the obvious suffering of situations. So something is painful, unpleasant, difficult, and it's an immediate kind of suffering that you can recognize when you become mindful. But there's also the subtle or hidden suffering in things, and that's particularly in pleasant and desirable objects and situations where you're tricked by the pleasure, but then it's causing suffering in the long run because it's been the cause for attachment. So what can I say? Your favorite food, you enjoy it when you have it, and you're happy because you've got it and you've got the means to get it. You know where to buy it and get it, and you're happy because you've got it and you're tasting it and you're enjoying it. So it doesn't seem like suffering at all, but it's underlying, there is suffering there because it's stimulating craving and attachment, and you haven't seen that. So actually, because this nature of this body and mind is bound up with suffering is all around us. It's just we don't notice it. So the idea is to develop mindfulness and insight into suffering, and just to recognize suffering as suffering. And that changes your relationship to it. Your mind changes the way you look at suffering, and the way you recognize suffering, it changes. The way you relate to things changes. That's the arising of insight, isn't it? You no longer are deluded or think something is good and desirable. If you know it's suffering, you start to cool off, don't you? You say, maybe it's not so good. Maybe it's not as good as I thought it was. It's only that much. It's only that good, because it also leads to attachment. So your mind starts to get weary. When you see suffering as suffering, your mind gets weary, doesn't it? It tires of the whole experience.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. I heard some Ajahn say that if a Dhamma teacher teaches wrongly, then they will go to hell. But if their intention is good, then how does the good and bad karma balance?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a generalization to say they teach wrongly, they'll go to hell. They may go to hell. Or maybe a temporary glitch or something that they are honest about and say, well, look, I'm giving you my opinion or view on this, but it may be wrong, and they know that they may be wrong, and then later they adjust and improve. So there's a few different factors, I think. It's hard to generalize. But if the teacher is still unenlightened, of course they're going to sometimes get it wrong because they're still practicing as well. Like Ajahn Chah used to teach the monks, he said, while you're teaching others, remember you're teaching yourself. Any wise teacher will have that kind of attitude. They don't just teach others and forget about themselves. They'll be teaching themselves and practicing as they teach. If they're genuinely teaching something that's wrong view, not in line with what the Buddha taught, not in line with the Dhamma, the Vinaya, if they're genuinely doing that and, in a very deliberate way, and they do it regularly, well, that's not good because they're damaging the whole religion, they're leading people in the wrong direction, so they are making some bad karma there, and depending on how enthusiastically they teach wrongly, then that will depend, how much bad karma they make will depend on that. But if their intention is as good as it can be and they're still learning from their experience, well, of course, in the long run that may win out, and the mistakes they've made may be not so important because their overall intention is good and they're learning and improving in their practice. And every teacher will have started off at some point in their life unenlightened, because everyone is born unenlightened. So you just have to accept that. Even the Buddha was born unenlightened. He was a very special person, bodhisattva, but he was born unenlightened. And we know even the Buddha spent 6 years practicing the ascetic practices, which he ultimately said this is not the way to Nibbana. But he was very clear on, when he started to teach later, he was very clear on that and said, well, these practices do not lead to true knowledge and vision of the way things are. They're not the way, they're not the path. So, most, say like Ajahn Chah, for example, one of the reasons people love him so much is because he's very clear on how he had developed the practice, and he was very good at explaining where he had gone wrong, but then how he righted or corrected his wrong views, and a lot of the suffering he went through dealing with his own attachments and defilements. He made the practice seem very real because he was talking about real human experience. And he certainly wasn't perfect from day one. He had to learn as he went along. But then he was clear on that. And he always said, if you meet a teacher and you think they're an arahant, just remember it's not sure. The entire is a minor, not sure. Keep that in the back of your mind. He says 99% you're sure it's an arahant and you listen to them and follow them, and that's fine. But just keep 1% available that it's not sure, just in case. Whether it's yourself and you think you're enlightened, okay, 99% sure, but just in case, 1% not sure, in case you've got it wrong. Because in the history of Buddhism, many practitioners have got it wrong. They thought they were enlightened when they weren't yet enlightened, or they thought they'd attained something that they hadn't, or they attained one level of enlightenment or one aspect of the path when they hadn't. So overestimation, misunderstanding is always possible. It's probably quite common, I think. But as long as you have that willingness to learn and you have that awareness that it's not sure, and you keep checking and looking and you're cautious, then it's all right, and you progress until eventually you reach something maybe that is sure and certain.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Developing metta citta, even for a moment, equal to sniffing the fragrance of a flower, is said to be of great benefit. Was the Buddha referring to a state of metta samadhi here?
Depends what he said in that sutta, that teaching, but really for metta to be pure, there probably will have had to be a few moments of metta beforehand as well. It's not like, just have one thought of metta and then move on to something else and completely forget metta and you're on to something else. It's not going to be like that in reality, is it? If you have pure metta of the sort that is very powerful, good karma, I think it's going to be metta that's backed by many factors of the path, sila, samadhi, panya. So it may well be metta in a state of samadhi, upajara samadhi, jhana. That's the best kind of metta, or the most solid, reliable kind of metta. It doesn't mean to say you can't have metta. You may not be very adept at developing samadhi yet. You can still have metta, of course, and some people have great metta. But, we say one moment of metta is a very powerful karma. Yes, it is, but almost certainly for it to be powerful karma, there will be other moments preceding it. It's something that person will have practiced a lot, I think.
Sadhu. Another question here. How does one cut off attachment to someone you are extremely grateful to? I'm having this difficulty not feeling attached to my late husband, who I'm extremely grateful to. My husband didn't get to know the Dhamma before he died, and neither did I. So I feel a strong need now to try and help him wherever he is.
Well, it's understandable if you live with someone as a husband and wife for many years. It's understandable if you form an attachment. You have to try and separate in your mind the good from the bad. So there's the good side. You can appreciate your husband and all the good that he did for you, for himself, for others, all his good qualities. You appreciate, you're thankful, you're grateful for that. But try to reflect on the harmful side of just attachment itself. Because what does attachment lead to? It leads to this suffering when you're separated, just the sadness, the grief of separation. And what you want to do is balance up your thinking, so you go back to accepting whoever it is, however good they are, however appreciative you are of a person. That relationship is not going to last forever, because we don't live forever. You have to separate through death. Ideally, you get to the point where you can accept that, you acknowledge it and accept it and be at peace with that truth. But acknowledging the truth of impermanence doesn't mean to say you forget the person. You can appreciate all the good, you can remember them, you can think of them, and you can share merit with your husband. He's died, you can share merit with him. But try to see the harm of attachment, the blindness of attachment, and how it conditions suffering. And try and separate that out in your mind. So what do you wish for your husband? You wish for him in his next life to come to the Dhamma, understand the Dhamma. You wish him well. You can do acts of merit making and dedicate it to him for that end. And then you let go. I know it's easier said than done, but that's what you have to do, isn't it? You wish him well and then you let go.
Sadhu Lungpo. Next question. Can Ajahn kindly explain Kama Tanha, Bhava Tanha, and Vibhava Tanha with an example?
Kama Tanha means sensual craving, sensual desire. So thinking of things that come to your senses. So desire for sight, sound, taste, smell, touch. Now usually we talk about the attractive things because they're the most obvious. So pleasant, beautiful sights, melodious sounds or interesting sounds, delicious tastes, fragrant smells, comfortable, pleasant touch through your skin, and then mental ideas, thoughts, memories based on other past sense contact. But the unpleasant sense contact can still stimulate sensual attachment, sensual desire in the negative sense. In you you want to get rid of the unpleasant sight, smell, touches. So it's still a form of desire and attachment. So we also have bhavadanha, which is, we say, craving to become. So literally it's the craving, the desire for life, and then the kind of life you want, who you want to be, what you want to be in this life, what you're looking for and expecting, and the world that you're trying to build for yourself, all the things that that comprises of. So it can be a very complex kind of craving that constantly is affecting you. As I said, in the most sort of, you reduce it down to its most basic form, it's just a desire for life. But, you know, the kind of life. So say you're single and you want to be married. Well, that's a form of bhavadanha, isn't it? I want a partner. I want children. That's bhavadanha. I want a job. I want a successful job. I want to make lots of money. I want lots of friends. I'm on social media and I want lots of likes and I want lots of people to follow me. These are all examples of bhavadanha, which may be mixed up with kamadanha as well. It's not like they're totally separate things, but bhavadanha is the general desire to be, to become, for existence and the kind of existence you want, and that obviously will affect how you behave and, you know, the things you do. And then vibhavadanha, craving for non-existence, craving not to become, what you don't want in life. So if you want a partner, you won't be happy being single. If you want a job, you won't be happy not having a job. If you want a promotion, you won't be happy not having a promotion. If you want people to like you, you won't be happy every time somebody is rude to you or dislikes you or ignores you. If you want to be rich, you won't be happy with what you've got. And basically, there's no end to that one. And that's one thing to remember with dana, craving. The Buddha said it's like an endless river. There's no end to it. So you have £1 million, dollars, cents, rupees, whatever. You'll want a 2 million, you want 100 million. There's no end to it. Craving doesn't know any satisfaction, no end. You have your favorite food once, you want it again. You know, sexual desire is a huge part of the craving, isn't it? Once you're hooked for life, aren't you? You just keep wanting it if you haven't seen through it. Any form of desire is like that, and that includes aversion, desire not to become, not to have, not wanting experiences that are unpleasant to you. There's no end to it, except through cultivating the path of sila, samadhi, panya, which brings you to see craving for what it is. It's the cause of suffering, therefore it's to be abandoned.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. In Majjhima Nikaya 72, the concept of lay people attaining Nibbana is discussed, and the Buddha says there are no lay people arahants. It appears anagami is the farthest a layperson can aspire to, which I'm certain is still a highly exalted level to attain. However, I still felt a bit uninspired reading this, as I would like to aspire to Nibbana and the end of suffering in the present life. However, I also have a wife, child, and a home. What advice do you have, Lumpur?
Oh, carry on aspiring to Nibbana. That sutta you just described doesn't stop you doing that. But, you know, the whole point is you have to accept where you're at on your path, and you've made the karma of having a family, a child, okay. Just have to accept that, acknowledge that, take responsibility for that. But, you know, first of all, get the basics right. You know, it's all right talking about Nibbana and anagamis and arahants from time to time, and, you know, that can help us set our goal and know where we're heading. But you also have to be practical. So if you've got a family, maybe your first goal is establish the 5 precepts. There's no way you can attain Nibbana until you've established the 5 precepts. So as a layperson, establish that. Practice meditation. Get into a regular meditation practice, however tired and however many burdens you have because of your family, your work, still get into a regular meditation practice, regularly listen to the Dhamma, keep the precepts, and you work out from there. And maybe as your children grow up, you get more time to focus on your own practice, and you become a bit wiser and more peaceful, hopefully. And hopefully your wife appreciates the practice as well and gives you time and supports you in what you're doing, and hopefully you support her in her practice. You can go a long way as a layperson, as we said. You can go all the way to Anagami. And it's not unheard of for lay people to attain Arahata Maggaphala. It's just that once they do that, their mind becomes the mind of an arahant. And so they tend to be living like a monk or a nun. So practically speaking, they will go and live in a monastic situation when they get to that point in their practice. Already as a 8 preceptor anagami, you're going to be living in a more monastic form. Even if you're living as a lay person, you would be maybe, you build your granny flat or your granddad flat out the back, or you're living in a kuti somewhere or in a quiet place, or more likely you'll be in a monastery by then anyway. I mean, we're just talking hypothetically here, so I really wouldn't get too wound up by it all. Just cultivate the path, keep going, and things will fall into place all by themselves. That's my belief. You don't have to think, oh, I can't make arahant this life because I'm a layperson. Just don't think like that. You're already shooting yourself in the foot. Just keep practicing, cultivating the Noble Eightfold Path, and things will start to come together. And no doubt by the time your children are grown up, old enough to look after themselves, you'll be ready to really go for it. Commit to the practice.
Sadhu Lungpo. Next question. Ajahn mentioned that the more we practice, the more we are aware of our own thinking. Recently, it happened to me that I often realize my own ugly thoughts. A lot of the time, it suddenly pops up from nowhere. Thoughts which are extremely bad and ugly. I personally feel so disgusting about it. I always made intervention by cutting off the thoughts instead of watching it mindfully. The reason is that I am afraid of the effect of the bad karma. I'm afraid the longer the thoughts stay, the worse the bad karma will become. I'm afraid instead of watching it mindfully, I will be dragged along and involved actively developing the bad thoughts. Please, Ajahn, give me some advice so that I have the courage to watch my own mind. Thank you so much, Ajahn.
Well, definitely in some situations, with some thoughts and intentions, the correct thing to do is just cut them off as quickly as possible. That sometimes is the right practice. And to do that, you have to be mindful. Otherwise, you wouldn't know that they're there and you wouldn't be able to cut them off. But you say you'd rather be able to be mindful of them. Well, yeah, if you are truly mindful, those thoughts are not going to last very long. Ajahn Chah used to compare mindfulness practice like you're sitting in the doorway of your house or the porchway and you have a chair there. You have a little hallway, say, and then all the thoughts, the intentions come in through the front door. They're all like visitors. But you're sitting there and there's only one chair. So they come in and they look around, oh, there's no chair. So then they have to go out again. That's like the practice of mindfulness, ongoing, continuous mindfulness. So things will come up, and some of those thoughts and intentions can be very ugly because we've got our own karmic conditioning. We've done them before, thought them before. Some are more in line with the Dhamma, some are really out of line with the Dhamma. You have to accept that. But you're there sitting on this chair, that's your mindfulness. And the idea is you don't leave the chair, because as soon as you leave the chair, those thoughts come in and they sit on the chair, they take over your mind. So you have to keep working at keeping the mindfulness, and then those thoughts, however ugly, powerful, distracting, overwhelming they seem, if your mindfulness is preserved, they won't be able to take over your mind. And they'll fade out quickly. And you have to practice on different levels. So you begin with the precepts. If you're practicing with the precepts, however bad or ugly the thought is, it won't lead you to say or do anything harmful. You'll just sit in the mind and, okay, that's still a problem. You have to deal with that. And that's where you develop mindfulness through meditation. Increasing mindfulness and then developing the wisdom, the insight to see those thoughts as impermanent, not self, to be abandoned. And that takes time maybe, but the first thing to establish is your precepts, so that however bad the thought is, you're not going to act on it. Even if you want to throttle someone, so angry, but you're not going to do it. You know, even if you want to run off with your neighbor's husband or wife, you have the thought, but you're not going to do it. That's your first aim. Second is to actually let go of the thought.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Dear Luang Por, in meditation, when I remind myself that this could be my last breath, I find it is easier to focus, because then there is no need of thinking of the past or planning for the future. Both are useless. Is this a good approach?
Much of the time that's a very solid, good approach, yes. Practicing letting go of everything and just making your mindfulness really strong with the breath. But occasionally you will have no choice, perhaps through various responsibilities and duties in life. You may have to reflect on the past or plan for the future. The idea is to have enough mindfulness so that when you're doing that, you know what you're doing. It's not idly dwelling on the past or ruminating, going over the past events. It's not fantasizing and getting lost in predictions and plans and desires for the future. But it may be that sometimes you have to do planning. So you just keep your mindfulness, you know, I'm making this plan, but you know, if you are truly mindful, you'll also know that what you're planning may not happen. It's uncertain, it's impermanent. So mindfulness allows wisdom to function. So you can have a plan in your mind, plan something, go through that for a while, but you're also aware of the impermanence, the not self, the conditioned nature of those plans, those thoughts. As long as you're mindful, you can do that. And then the thoughts about the future are not really an obstacle to the practice. They're just a function of the mind, just a job you're doing, say, and then you let them go and put them down. That might be your aim. But when you're meditating, a lot of the time you are just letting go of everything. Just make your mindfulness really strong on the breath. That would be a good start to your practice.
Sadhu. Next question. Dear Luang Por, I see that my mind is interested in some parts of the practice and doesn't want other parts. I also see the fear of not having much freedom to fully commit the rules from day one to the end of my life. As you said, it is because of the mind still being shakeable. What should I do?
Keep going, be patient, and just observe those doubts, the doubting mind, the lack of self-confidence. That can change through practice. If you keep going day by day, keep practicing precepts, keep practicing mindfulness, reflecting on the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, you'll find quite organically, quite naturally, all by itself, your mind will grow in the Dhamma, your understanding will grow. It'll get easier to keep precepts, easier to recognize defilements, let them go, easier to establish mindfulness. All by itself, it will just happen if you keep going, automatically. And one day you'll wake up and you'll say, I don't feel so much doubt. I don't experience so much doubt as I did before. I don't feel so unconfident about my practice as I used to. Things will change. How quick, how slow, you don't have to think about that. You just keep going and everything will progress in the right direction.
Sadhu Luang Por. One more question for tonight. Dear Ajahn, could you please explain the 8 precepts for lay people, specifically the practice of abandoning a high bed and beautification in the lay life?
Well, the 5 precepts are the sort of center of our practice. The 8 precepts are a heightened version, particularly to support the practice of meditation. It's what we call nekama, a certain amount of renunciation. So giving up food in the evening, giving up entertainments, music, sports, dressing up, adorning oneself, makeup, beautification, as you said, and then not sleeping on a high or luxurious bed. So this one is a sort of, in this modern age, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to define it exactly, but it's getting the attitude right. You know, the Buddha is encouraging us just to sleep, to rest the body and not indulge in sleep. And then also, you know, high luxurious beds are often associated with sexual activity, indulgence in sleep, eating in bed, watching TV in bed, you know, all that kind of stuff. Is a whole range of things, isn't it? The culture of the high and luxurious bed. You know, people buy a new home, and you know the way they advertise it. You know, they give you the biggest bed, or you go to a hotel. You know, the biggest, widest, queen, king, triple, quadruple bed with all the frills. So it's obviously not that. Ideally, it might be just a very simple, thin mattress on the floor. So if you have, say at home, you have a big double divan bed, thick mattress, well, that may be a place where you associate with a lot of sensuality, sexuality, and indulgence. So, you know, if you're going to keep the 8 precepts, maybe move out of that bed on the days you're keeping the 8 precepts and just sleep on a thinner mattress on the floor. But, you know, if you're in a cold country, well, maybe you still want to be off the floor, so you may have a more simple bed with a thin mattress, perhaps. You know, there's a bit of variation allowed. The idea is not to indulge in sleep as such, as a pastime, as a hobby. You know, all those hobby sleepers out there, you know, I'm sorry, if you keep the 8 precepts, it's time to step up a bit, reduce your sleep to a modest level where you're getting enough sleep for good health, but you're not indulging. And, you know, it goes hand in hand with celibacy. If you keep the 8 precepts, you're avoiding all sexual activity. And you'll notice if you're in a high and luxurious bed, it encourages sexual activity. So sleeping on a mat on the floor is really good for being celibate. And that may be possible if you're in a house and you normally have 1 bedroom, you're married or whatever, you have a partner. Well, maybe if you're keeping 8 precepts, you go to another room with a simple bed, or in even another place. So you go on a retreat or go to a monastery or something. So you know, after a while you get the idea, don't you? You're not indulging in sensual and sexual activity and all the different things that support that. So you're sleeping on a simple bed. You're not adorning yourself to make yourself look good to the opposite sex or to whoever your sexual partner is. You wear simple clothes. You don't wear makeup. You don't spend hours doing your hair if you're keeping the 8 precepts. You take monastic form as a guideline. You don't have to look exactly like a monk or a nun, but you know what the monk and nuns do, or they wear a simple robe, they're shaving the head, they don't wear makeup, they don't wear perfume, they don't listen to music, they don't sleep on luxurious beds, and they're celibate. You're taking that guideline. So, you know, people have these kind of questions. Can I put on kind of skin cream for my skin problem? Okay, well, if it's of medical use and you're helping to reduce itchiness, or you have some skin problem, okay, you can put some cream on. But you have to look at your intention, isn't it? You're not putting cream on to impress or make yourself look beautiful to other people. That's not the purpose of the 8 precepts. If you're going to keep the 8 precepts, keep them properly. Don't fool yourself. You know, some people do this, they trick themselves there. I'm keeping my 8 precepts but they're not really doing that. So don't lie to yourself. Keep the 8 precepts as defined by the Buddha and as normal practice on retreats or in monasteries, those kind of places. That's where you'll get the idea. And then you use it to improve your effort in meditation, simplify your life, cut out a lot of sensuality. And if you get used to it, you'll probably find it's a great relief, a great peace that you don't have to dress to impress other people, do your hair, wear your makeup, put all kinds of clothes on to impress others. You just wear suitable clothing for meditation and practicing the Dhamma. You don't have to cook food in the evening because you only eat in the morning. You don't have to go for entertainments and sports and music and all of that. Life is streamlined, and at first it may take some effort to get used to it, but once you're used to it, it's very pleasant. And it's a great relief of a lot of superfluous activity, human activity that is a cause of a lot of suffering.
Sadhu Lungpo. That may be the last question for tonight.
Okay, well, keep up your Dhamma practice, and we wish you all well till next time.